It's Halloween, but not as you know it. Hello, Linda. Hello.
We're here. We have a field trip.
Oh, a field trip. Oh, wonderful. I always get into so much mischief when I'm on a field trip.
I do as well, and I enjoy them so much. Someone was telling me of a location that I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with. They keep referring it to as the Dark Woods.
Ooh.
So why don't we trek out and maybe set up a campfire? And Cornelia has given us each a canteen.
A surprise tipple. Oh, I do love a tipple. Or 2 or 7.
This is quite, if you look at the size of the canteens, they're going to sustain us through the journey.
Oh, fantastic. Now, the location wasn't given to you by any brownies, was it?
No, but it was one of the band members. And we don't know. We don't know.
We don't quite know what
they are.
Sort of species or pan-dimensional being they are.
Correct. But I'm okay with that.
Oh, exactly. They make lovely music, so...
Right, that's
we'll
right.
Trust them.
So let's head out.
Fantastic. Lovely. After you.
Here we go. Highways of horrors and the dark wood.
The quiet roads and footpaths of our lands provide passage from one place to another. These liminal spaces are transitional, taking us from one to another, rarely thought about when it is the destination that usually excites us. However, the journey is far more important than the destination. It is not where you are going, but how you get there. And when you travel along some paths, you may never reach your destination. For on these highways of horror, many a threat waits, veiled in the darkness of night. Some of these dangers are tangible, some might say real. The ravenous creature, hungry for human flesh, the elusive murderer of historic tales and urban legend, the paths that lead to nowhere except a terrible death, lost and alone and afraid. Then there are those dangers which take a more non-corporeal form, the lonely apparition, the jealous ghost, the ancient spirits that step quietly in the blackness. These may seem the works of fantasy, of a mind too eager to believe in phantoms and whimsies. Nevertheless, they instill within us a palpable fear that is no less real than the physical threats we face. These beings of supernatural origin are the stuff of legend, of folklore, and of bygone whispers that terrified our ancestors to the degree where they would not even dare say their names for fear of summoning some foul entity from the veil. This is our heritage, as real in existential threat as any killer's blade or bear's claw. So, do you dare travel with us this evening, along the highways of horror and paths of the dark wood? Are you courageous enough to seek out those hidden wraiths who regard us with malevolent intent? will you remain by our sides as we sit round this campfire and share tales of the places we travel through, hoping they are never to become our last destination and final resting place. Oh, that's a lovely fire. Come on, everyone, come and sit round.
It's so sparky. I love it. There's something about when the sparks fly and they just escape into the atmosphere. I love it. And it smells heavenly as well.
Isn't it lovely?
Yes, it is. And we are surrounded by dark woods.
Oh, absolutely. It can't see very much beyond.
Can't see. I can hear a lot of stuff. Not sure what that noise is, but...
Is it my tummy rumbling? Are there s'mores?
No, I think it's something else.
Oh. No s'mores then.
Well, you can eat all the s'mores you want. You can have mine because you know my feelings about chocolate.
Inhuman.
Just eat them downwind for me, okay? I don't want to smell it. Because you'll hear other noises. Precisely.
It took me ages to work out what a graham cracker was because we don't have graham crackers.
Really?
No, we don't. Yeah. So the first time I had s'mores and graham crackers, I was like, what's a graham cracker? Thinking it was like what we call a cream cracker, which is like a water wafer. And
Okay.
cheese.
Yeah.
So the thought of having one of those with marshmallow and chocolate.
No. Yeah, no. No.
Talking of which, have you looked in your flask? Do you know what your tipple is yet?
I don't know what possessed her to give this to me, but it tastes like liquid IV. It's it's very salty and it is a fake tang taste.
Is it electrolytes? Is that what you need to keep you?
That might be what it is. It's pretty vile, but she told me to drink it because I'm going to need it. So what's yours?
I got hot chocolate. Do you want to sniff? No. That's probably why she gave me the liquid IV, because she's going to be hurling. You need to replenish.
Oh, no. But at least it's cold, so that's good. I'm happy it's cold.
You know, well, these poor people who have joined us, they're expecting a Halloween extravaganza, not Linda being possessed and vomiting everywhere. I mean, we can't have that.
Oh, no fun. It's important to say that it's Halloween, but not as you know it.
Yes, this is more the ween of Hallow.
Oh man, what am I going to do with you?
Roads, passages, trails, any path of travel from one place to another is usually regarded as temporary, a transitional experience that is neither lasting or particularly significant, except in some special circumstances. These, along with other liminal spaces, can even seem a bit of a hindrance when the person is yearning to get to their destination. However, life is a liminal space, a journey along a road, a passage, a trail. The only real destination in life is death. So many get into the habit of treating life like a thing to get through, when actually it is of more importance and of more significance than the destination, unless you allow it to be otherwise. This is why these spaces hold such power in many ways. They are the unknown quantity, the paths that have many endings, the one we envisage and the others that we don't. And for so many people, the roads, the trails of our world become their final moments on Earth, and it is here their lives are celebrated. I often talk about the never know, the day, the hour, the moment of death that we never know is coming, the unceremonious never know of the roadside or being lost on a trail in the woods. We rarely envisage such nondescript, insignificant places as being the finale to our own stories, the eulogy to the life that we lived. However, these liminal spaces are so elegiac in how they represent the unfinished hope, the shattered dreams, the half-spoken sentence that ended before reaching the full stop. They remind us that every path is somehow incomplete and longing to tell the untold story, the lost narrative of what could have been, what would have been, and what should have been. The PsyQ experience is the telling of the stories, yet through our own lives and perspectives, how we are taking an analog journey that can reveal the mysteries of the highway through the journey. There's always that moment of solemnness when you're traveling along a road and you see bouquets of flowers on the side of the road, and maybe the image of the person who's died there in some form of accident, whether they be a motorist or whether they be a pedestrian. And there is something that is very somber about that experience, because here in this mundane place that you arrive at and pass before you even know it, something so significant in a person's life took place, and it was essentially their end. And there is a real incongruity about the nature of roads and passages and pathways, and the nature of endings in terms of life and death.
Something that just popped into my head that I haven't thought about in decades, literally. When I was much younger, there's a portion of road, actually not too far from here, very, very sharp curve in the road. And I remember as a young child driving with my parents to wherever, I would always cringe as we approached that curve, to the point where I would, as a child, cry. You know, my parents were always like, "What's wrong with you?" kind of thing. There's nothing to be afraid of. And yet I felt that's not a safe corner. As I got older, in my teenage years, where I didn't have my parents telling me it wasn't anything to be scared of, I was driving with some friends and I had that experience again. One of the people I was with said, "Oh, there was a really, really bad accident here years and years and years ago." And I thought, well, maybe that's what it is. But then part of me started thinking, what a way to imprint a spot. You know, with that story, how do we know that that's accurate? What do we know of that story to be true? And regardless if I'm feeling uncomfortable or not, is that really the right way to address this moving forward? And as time went on, I'd like to say I probably convinced myself to get over it. But now, having gone through one therapy and hearing you talk about these kinds of things on sudden endings and what it does and how we as humans cope with that, it makes me think, like, maybe I need to revisit that to have a better understanding, because every experience is of value,
Yes,
regardless of when it happened.
absolutely. And I find that fascinating because, in so many ways, life and death are like a hill. And when in life you can only see the one side of the hill, and it's not until the death process begins and the death adventure starts to take place that we crest the hill and see the other side,
Right.
whatever that may
Whatever
be.
that is, yeah.
And however we each individually have a perspective or an idea of what that may be for us. And in life, when we think to that hillside and we think to the crest of the hill, we only ever see it from the perspective of life.
Mm.
And the other side is something that is not of life. And so we really can't say definitively
What it is,
what
yeah.
it is. We can believe, we can have faith, we can have hope, but to say definitively what it is, we struggle.
Yeah.
And yet there is this sense, just from a physiological point of view, that when living organisms die, the neurochemistry is such in the dying organism that it is euphoric, a sense of complete and utter peace with themselves, with life, and everything that has happened in life and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And that is always it's a very comforting thought for me personally, that there is something in this universe, in this world, in life, that had the foresight to make that experience ultimately a pleasurable one and a joyous one. An uncaring universe would not have had
Right.
that thought. It would not have mattered. So as cruel as we understand nature to be, the cycle of life and all of the things that happen in life, as heartless and as cruel as that may seem at times, there is always this sense that the ending is blissful and all the fear washes away. And in that respect, when we come to explore this idea of death on the roadside, a tragic accident where many died, we can only see our side of the hill, what we might experience in that moment of realization, in the moment of the accident, and that moment of fear and terror and pain and suffering. Cresting the hill, there is that sense of the bliss, the euphoria, the being at peace that our neurochemistry foretells of. And it is in that cresting of the hill that we don't necessarily think about when we experience these liminal spaces of horror. And really, they are there and reserved for those who are going through that death adventure experience.
Right.
But it is something which is very intriguing in terms of these usually seen as very dark, very ominous, very scary places. What if we connect into the joy just over the hill? Then what is the narrative and the story of that place?
Interesting. So it prompts me, anyway. I would want to explore that. I would want to investigate that with that thought process, not I want to go and get scared, which is unlikely to happen. I want to go and experience the effects of the incident in the all-expansive, unlimited potential of crossing over. I hate to use that word, but crossing over into, or that phrase, crossing over into more.
Yes.
Because ultimately, in my mind, that's what happens.
Yes.
When we no longer exist, we become part of the whole in its fullest perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. The idea that the end of life is both a reconciliation of all that has happened in that life, the requiem for that life, and yet there is a transition through the death adventure where the claustrophobia of that life is dissipated.
Yeah.
and suddenly we open up to the more, and we lose our sense of identity, we lose our sense of self, and become more than. And again, that is an elegiac experience, one of bittersweet reverie for the past and extraordinarily powerful hope for what happens after.
Right, right. Like, it's going to sound a little twisted, but who wouldn't want that? You know, not now. I'm not saying now, but to know that if you live your life with the intention of every experience helps you become more evolved and more embracing of the unlimited potential that we can tap into. And knowing that when that time is done, you can take all of the experience and it just comes along with you to be part of more.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's another one of those makes your head go poof, you know, but
Absolutely. Yes, yeah. Human beings tend to go towards the dark in these sorts of scenarios. The lonely highway, the lost dark woods. People think scary because there are some very real dangers out there in the world.
Of course, yeah.
However, within the paranormal or supernatural experiences, these traditionally dark places that people fear, whether it be full-on terror or whether it be that somewhat pleasurable, excited sense of fear that a lot of people get in terms of the paranormal experience, a little bit frightened, a little bit excited. Any of those experiences are not the experience of the death adventure and that life that has come to an abrupt and sudden end, often unexpectedly, yet is essentially a joyous experience.
Yeah.
The other side of the hill. And we very rarely go to that experience.
Yeah.
Excuse the term, it is the term that I use to communicate a specific area of PsyQ, but the area of lost souls, which to me completely and utterly is a misnomer, but it is the common phraseology.
Yes,
for that experience.
Yes, it is.
I feel that there's something very different going on there, but it is interesting in terms of the PsyQ experience and working with lost souls. It is a predominantly pleasurable experience for the PsyQ practitioner and consultant.
Absolutely. It totally shifts you shift your perspective completely. I don't want to say against, but for lack of a better word, against what is known as the definition of lost. They're lost.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that always amazes me how there is a connecting point in the suffering, the pain, the lost bit, and how within the space of minutes there is a journey that takes place that goes from that darkness and into this joyous experience. I have seen so many people burst into tears of joy at that moment when the crest of the hill happens, and just for a glimpse, just this tiny little fleeting fragment of time, they get a sense of the allness, the beyond, the more than, and the emotion that just wells up and bursts out of them is extraordinary. A real commentary on the experience of human beings, how we seek the pain, the suffering, the darkness. We don't go there seeking that joyous moment of oneness at the end of it. When you shift your perspective and start seeking out the oneness and that burst of emotion as you crest the hill, that's where I want to be.
Right. That's what I was saying before. Who wouldn't want that?
Exactly.
Who wouldn't want to shift it? Not now, but who wouldn't want that as a better option?
Yeah.
And to have that kind of knowing.
Yeah.
So whenever it happens,
Yeah.
you have that piece already of saying, okay, this is a transition. Basically, you're liberated. You're liberated, and free from the limitations that we all experience through life, being human.
When death is expected, or there is some form of clue or clues that this is going to happen, there is information, knowledge which leads to this is probably going to happen.
Yep.
There is a journey of reconciliation that people go on, from denial and complete denial through to the acceptance and the reconciliation and the full circle fulfillment. In terms of the liminal spaces, the roads, the trails, the places from one place to another, the journey is one from A to B, not one of reconciliation. It's not one where there is ever an expectation of death and of endings. It is a very different experience. The emotion associated with these is very shocking and sharp and painful in many ways, because it's that moment of realization of, oh, this is the never know. Contained in that moment is so much of the things that we didn't do in life, the wasted moments, the minutes that equate to hours, days, weeks, months, years, decades of life just lost in nothingness because they weren't precious or cherished. We were too busy getting from A to B to actually acknowledge those moments. And so much of that is wrapped up in those liminal spaces.
It's like joining chain links. You want to break the chain of your ancestral limits. Break that chain so that moving forward, you're liberated. I'd like to think, from what you just said, I'd like to think that we can build a new chain that pulls us along. So when we look back, whenever the day comes, there's no regret. You've done your best, given the circumstances or the conditions or whatever they may be. But there's freedom in that moment of reconciliation where you say, I did okay. If you've discovered what your limits are based on the definitions of the old chain that were given to you, if you can look back and say, that doesn't serve me any longer, and here's my new link that will keep me anchored in the moment and be able to embrace it and be able to find joy in it, it kind of cancels out the limit. It's autumn, and it's also the time of year when New England's reputation of having many haunted happenings gets its fire poked to recharge and add to its thus far rich history. Towns dotted along the coastline carry with them stories of haunted houses and centuries-old graveyards, including frightening tales of creepy occurrences on lonely roads isolated from the main highways. One such roadway is located not too far from where I grew up. Tower Hill Road isn't a well-traveled road, as generally only people who live on the road venture down. It's a heavily wooded place, with some portions of the road only wide enough for one vehicle to pass, with large stones jutting out on the curves. There are tight twists to turn, and the hills that bring you up and down very quickly. During the day, it's easier to navigate as you can see a bit ahead, but not enough to be able to drive with any great speed. For if you did decide to drive faster, you'd pretty much feel like you were on a roller coaster ride at an amusement park. Nighttime changes the whole atmosphere of the road, since there are no streetlights, and the only light guiding you along your way is from the headlights of your car. At night, as you drive along carefully, the woodland seems to come alive, with its branches seemingly appearing to reach out and brush up against your car. The night air is filled with all sorts of sounds. A hoot from an owl, a pack of coyotes, or perhaps the nightly yowl of a fox. As you open your window further to take in more of the air and sounds, you might hear the bullfrog's street vendor-like call, "Jug o' rum! Jug o' rum!" or the high-pitched peep from a spring peeper. But deciding to open your window in the first place takes a bit of bravery, for you can literally reach out and touch the foliage. But this means something could also reach in and touch you. Your ears begin to filter out the natural sounds and seek out the unusual. And before long, you do hear them. Was that a tree limb being broken? Was that an unnatural sounding growl? Did you actually just hear children's laughter? Many who are seeking a bit of an adventure will travel down Tower Hill and report various sightings of odd phenomena. Interestingly, many have seen ghost children, as well as strange specters in the woods and meadows along the road. My own personal experiences have been fun, and yet leave me a bit bewildered, because I'm not quite sure what I am seeing. As I've seen lights in the thick woodland areas, as well as having this strange feeling of being watched. I'll admit, I usually end up putting my window all the way up nice and tight when this haunting feeling comes over me. A challenge that I like to do, and I don't necessarily recommend it to others, but it's kind of fun to shut your headlights off so that you're in complete black darkness. This is fine when there's a full moon, but not recommended when it's a new moon. Overall, I still enjoy the road. It's really a hauntingly beautiful place, full of history dating back to the early 1600s. I've always entertained the thought of living on this road. Would you?
The liminal spaces such as roads, highways, passages, trails, these places that take us from one space to another space, from the beginning of the journey to the destination, there is this sense of movement along a path. And very often the experiences that we have paranormally reflect that sense of movement through life and the ever plummeting towards the inevitable. And so much bound up in those situations where there is that sense of regret and sense of longing for the things that never happened, the things that never came, the things that turned out to be the wrong choice for some people. And then we have the other side of the liminal space, which is the temporary residence, the place where we come to congregate, to come together. So, for example, in the woodland, where we come together as a community of people, and our ancestors would have come together to sit around the safety of the campfire and to regale each other in the stories and the narratives of their own lives and experiences, and how in these spaces we not only have the journeying through but the coming together of. And that fascinates me as well, how there is this sense of the dynamics within a place and the purpose of that place are often reflected in the paranormal experiences that we have there. And the woodlands tend to be very primal.
Yes.
In their experiences. So those things that would have been talked about in story form by our ancestors, the things out there in the dark that would not even be named because they were so terrifying and so dangerous that to name them was to summon them. These beings have a deep primal fear for us, because they are so tied and intrinsic to nature, and they resonate with a part of us that is so primal and intrinsically linked to nature, that in many ways there is this sense of not only the power of these places and the danger of them, but also the power and the danger within ourselves.
Right.
And I find it so extraordinary how in the woodland, in the forest, in the dark woods, this sense of communion with the primal, whether that be the primal self or primal force of nature, is extraordinary, and is another layer of our journey of mapping the human experience into different forms of the space around us.
Right. And you just made me think, to add another facet to that, the primal forces of nature or the primal forces within. What about recognizing there's no separation between the two?
Absolutely, yes.
And that experience, that realization, that moment of sensing that connection simply by defining it.
Yes.
You are conjuring up that power.
Yes.
But it's not outside of you. It's within.
Absolutely.
And you recognize that it's within, like looking in a mirror, because that's what it's like.
Yeah, definitely. We talk about in Celtic Reiki the differentiation thing that we as humans do, where we know we breathe the air. We know we're made of the same water as the oceans. We know that all of the food that we eat comes at some point from the earth. But there's something in the simplest act of a footstep where we can lift one foot up away from the earth and then the other. And that slight little bit of disconnection is all encompassing when it comes to how we disconnect ourselves from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so many humans, particularly in modern society and big cities, they understand that the earth is one thing, and yet they see themselves as something different. Even to the point where you say that you are the earth, and they go, yeah, logically, I know that, I understand that, but it's still me and the earth.
Right.
And in Celtic Reiki, we make no differentiation.
Right.
There is no differentiation between the human being and the earth. They are one. We are the earth with absolutely every fiber of our being, every breath we take, every molecule of water in our bodies, our sustenance, our shelter, everything is earth. We could not survive as living organisms if we didn't take earth with us when we travel beyond the earth. In terms of that disconnect that we do psychologically between a human being individual and the earth, we really begin to see this in these natural spaces where that primal force exists, and it exists within us, and the recognition of that very often is the thing that causes us fear and frightens us when we actually connect into that.
Because it shouldn't be, but it's foreign. it's like meeting something for the first time that you don't know what it is, because it's overwhelming to feel and sense and pick up, what is this? And this is going to become a common phrase for me, but who wouldn't want that?
We need t-shirts with your face saying, who wouldn't want that?
Oh my goodness, that's wonderful. but really, I mean, it just eliminates so much confusion and fear, when even though none of us can truly define accurately what it's like to fully experience oneness in our physical, in our mental physical state. We can acknowledge it intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, but until we cross over, and again, I use that phrase because there's nothing else that's popping into my head, to have that full sensory experience, it's these little blips of experiences that make it real.
Yeah. The paranormal experiences that one is likely to have in the dark woods, very often there is this sense of this primeval being that we encounter, and many people will talk about sort of elementals is the term that people often use. And in many ways these elementals in air bunnies are just ourselves and our primal nature that is saying hello. And it fascinates me because as human beings, extensively, we are a spectrum that goes all the way from our primal innate nature, our lizard brain, our instincts, everything that has come before us in terms of our heritage, our ancestry, our DNA.
Right.
All of this is part of this primal arena, but we take that and we grow beyond it into these feeling, sensory based, emotional, intellectual, spiritual beings. And we contextualize ourselves into all of these different boxes when actually we are a liminal space. We are literally the journey from Earth to universe, from the ground to the sky, from our primal self to our spiritual self, and that exists beyond.
Right.
There is this sort of crossover between the two, which I find fascinating, which is the primal experience of the woodland and the dark woods, that very nature-based experience of what many people would see as terrifying creatures and beings that exist in nature and in the woodland, and the liminal space of the highway, the road, and how very often road-based entities are very primal in nature too. So one example that we have here in the UK is the hairy hands, which is a very particular entity that has been known to cause accidents and is very, very well known in the Dartmoor area, as well as very well known in folklore of the British Isles. Upon the lonely hills of Dartmoor, a single road snakes its way across the undulating landscape. These sombre peaks peer as sentinels through the mist and fog, marking ominous shadows against a dark sky. The stillness of night is only broken by the gentle meandering of lonely wraiths that drift silently across the thoroughfare. Close to the isolated village of Postbridge, travellers along the B3212 have, for over a century, reported a terrifying phenomena that grips them, literally, and pulls them into a living and sometimes dying nightmare. Often, the creatures of the supernatural pose only a threat of mind and existential peril to the weary traveller. They torment our emotions and remind us of our own mortality. Yet here, in this place, the danger is not of some intangible nightmare, but towards that of life and a very real, palpable fate. The hairy hands of Dartmoor are attributed with many accidents along this stretch of road, and whilst some of those horrifying crashes are fatal, a few have survived to tell their stories. Driving through the night, the road only illuminated by the focused beams of vehicles, a pair of phantom hands appears from the darkness and wrenches the steering from the driver. This often results in the vehicle careening from the road. Whilst many see this as simply the imaginings of a tired driver unfamiliar with the road and the terrain, there are others who believe a more paranormal truth to the hungry grasp of these deadly and malevolent fingers. For their intent is purely to drive the vehicle and its occupants from the road, wide-eyed and open-jawed towards a terrible end. The reality of this place and its history is long since debated, and shall continue to stir the passions of those who have an opinion. Not only on a simple road through a desolate moor and the frame of mind of those who journey along that route, but also of those who ponder the more unorthodox questions. For this is a conundrum not of geography and geology, but of spiritual beliefs and the greater reflection of what exists beyond our own mortality. However, location is not a narrow thing, confined to what we see and hear around us. Our knowing can expand across a great distance and through time itself. So what do we feel here upon this lonely artery of asphalt? What is the strange vibration that permeates each face of rock and dark crevasse? What is the thing that lurks in the distance, waiting, watching, wanting for a faint, pale glimmer of light upon the horizon? The twin beams of an approaching vehicle that, with a precise and quantifiable momentum of speed and direction, heads towards an unexpected and terrible destination. This is a fascinating transition where the roadway has this very primeval force that literally steers people off the road and very often to their deaths. The stories of the hairy hands has been about for decades. I was really interested to see what this liminal space entity was like.
Have you traveled? I'm assuming you've traveled that road.
I have traveled, yes. I've traveled along the road, a while back now, but I have traveled along the road between the two little villages that
The
these
designated spot.
the
of
designated
activity.
spots.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I have traveled along that road, and it does have an air, an atmosphere about it, which is very interesting. The thing with that part of the country and all of the West Country in Britain is that it feels very different. The geography is very different in the west of Britain than it is in the east. Two different continents, one the North American continent and one the European, and literally sort of cuts the British Isles in half, where the west is North American geography and the east is European. And it is very interesting with the granite and the solid rock that makes up much of the west of the Isles.
Okay.
It feels different. It has a different sensation to it. And I found the experience of going along that road really tied in with that vibrational experience. I could literally think about places where I've been that have contained a lot of granite or a lot of rock, and how that experience feels in terms of
It's fascinating. That's fascinating. I mean, when you started describing the continent differences, as you know, with me being a New Englander, we frequently go up to Maine, in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is a granite state, and I'm trying to recall, like, does it feel different to me? It's mountain and ocean, and I always associated it with that, even though where we live is not too far from the ocean. But it's fascinating that it's the granite that you suspect it's the granite that is
yeah, I mean,
energetic signature of something
absolutely.
causing an effect.
It's interesting because this is the thing with a lot of sort of paranormal experience, supernatural experience. It's very easy to go down the paranormal investigation route and to try and find scientific explanation as to what is going on. The whole 18 hertz air
Yep.
conditioning unit experience, where certain air conditioners vibrate at 18 hertz, it causes a pressing on the eye and can cause visual hallucinations. It's very easy to go down that route and to try and find scientific, physical explanations as to why a person might be experiencing what they're experiencing.
Oh, yeah.
And that's an interesting one for me, because the moment you start talking about the geography and the geology of the land and what the mineral makeup is, you start to go down that road of the science of it, and that's absolutely fine. It's acceptable.
It's part of the puzzle.
It's part of the jigsaw puzzle, exactly. And this is the thing for a lot of people. Understanding that can give them an access point. It can give them a doorway to come through to enjoy
Yes.
the experience. If
Yes.
you're having that experience, does it matter at the end of the day if it is a chunk of granite beneath your feet or a supernatural entity? The thing is that there is something there.
Yeah.
There is an experience there.
Yes.
Different people need different access points,
Yes.
and that doesn't separate the source of that experience. It just means that one person can accept it as being granite based and one will accept it as being paranormal based, and there will be 100 more people who accept it in 100 other different ways.
Yeah.
This, very much like the placebo effect, is a question of what's more important, the experience, the moments that you take away from that, and the
Precisely.
value that you have, the reward you get from that experience,
Right.
or the nature of the experience.
Right.
There is a scientific thread that runs through this in terms of the granite, and there is also the west of Britain is full of granite. Why is this not everywhere? Why is it that particular place? And that was what was very interesting traveling through that area, that it was very disorientating. Real dizzy, woozy head feeling a little bit out of it. And I could really see how people could, in that state, experience a pair of hairy hands moving their steering wheel. And there would be examples of the scientific inquiry there, involuntary movement, spasming, etc., muscle movements based on hallucinations. And then there will be paranormal experiences of this being an entity that is trying to, a malevolent entity that's trying to get people off the road. And then somewhere in there is my own experience of it, which is something that is an altered state of awareness caused by something in the environment.
Oh, I'd love to experience that. We've talked previously at great lengths about synesthesia, and we're all capable of experiencing it. The more we embrace that and open ourselves up to that, we become more receptive to everything that is around us.
Yes.
So it doesn't surprise me that you picked up the frequency, energetic signature, whatever you want to call it, of that area, because everything has an energetic signature. Everything. We do everything. There's no escape. This is going to sound so corny, but I enjoy the experience of life in a different way than I ever have. Studying constantly one therapy stuff, it just gives you a whole different perspective on what you're encountering.
Absolutely.
And how to navigate, in spite of whatever it may be.
And I think that the immersion in one therapy, investing so much of my life in the origination of one therapy, and the hyper awareness that has instilled within me, translates to when I visit a place such as Dartmoor. There is this sense of the transcending of time and space, where there is a sensory experience, an otherworldly intelligence, where I know that there is something in that space and have an awareness of where that thing is. So whether that be, for example, an architectural construction, like a haunted house, for example, I will know where in the house things are without even going into the house. In the case of moor, being able to know there is something in that moor, it's just not here at the moment. And that's something that is incredible with that one therapy, in particularly PsyQ experience. The process of learning and evolution and going through life is very much at the heart of the PsyQ experience,
Right.
PsyQ being your psychic intelligence.
Absolutely.
Applying that intelligence to the situations that you're in is what it's all about. It's not necessarily having an experience and locking down that experience as a particular thing, be it scientific, be it paranormal, be it hallucinatory or experiential or synesthesia or anything. It's about applying that PsyQ in an evolved way. So you're constantly growing and evolving and learning through that experience. And as human beings, we tend to grasp onto something, and when we get hold of a thing and we hold on to it, we tend to clasp our fingers around it and hold, just as a baby would do with a finger that's presented to it. The trick of PsyQ is to catch that moment and then let go, propelling oneself towards the next moment. Right. So that we are constantly evolving our experiences within the realms of the paranormal. An experience that I had many, many years ago, which sort of has lots of connections to what we're talking about here, because it was in the West, it was Wales rather than the West Country. There is a particular mountain valley in Snowdonia, which I just think is stunningly beautiful. And in this valley, there is one particular mountain that I just love to climb. And when I say climb, I mean it's a very safe trail. And when I say safe, it's mountain safe. So, And this trail starts off on a lovely, gentle slope where they've placed these slate tiles to walk on, and it's all very gentle and lovely, and then it goes up, and when you start to get a little bit higher, it gets a bit more precarious as you go along the ridge, and you get to a drop that is quite, it's thousands of feet, which is quite interesting, particularly if you don't like height. I love this trail, and this one particular time I was climbing up this trail by myself, and there's one particular area where they've built these slate steps into the mountain face, and there's this strange bit where the steps stop and it becomes part of the mountain, and there's this jutty out rock thing and a few little footholds that you have to climb over. Going up, you can use the footholds and literally put yourself up over the edge really easily, and use this jutty out thing as a handhold, so you can actually sort of push yourself up on it and take some of the weight. I knew when I passed it that it was going to cause me trouble on the way down. Going up mountains, I can be very gazelle-like. Very difficult to imagine that looking at me, but I can go up quite quickly. The coming down, I am like a dog with worms.
Oh.
In as much as I... in as much as my bottom is usually firmly planted on the ground and I'm shuffling along with my legs.
Oh my goodness.
Depending on how steep the gradient, depends on whether there's a trail or not.
Yep. or if there's anything to grab on hold.
Claw marks down the side, yeah. So when I was going up this mountain and I came across this bit, I knew that it was going to cause
challenge.
Going to be challenging on the way down. Because I had done this path a few times previously, I've done many times since, I knew that was the bit going down that I didn't like. It was the bit that I sort of always had a bit of trepidation around. So sort of went up, came back down again. And this time, as I was maneuvering past this piece of rock, trying to slide down, which is what you had to do, sort of slide over the crest of this rock to get your feet down on the path directly below.
Yep. You're making my hands clammy just thinking about it.
and as I did this, the jutty out rock thingy caught on my rucksack, my backpack, and caught the handle. So I was literally pinned. And what I had to do was, if I wanted to get out of this situation, was push myself away from the edge so that I could get the rucksack back over the edge of this jutty out rock. And that would mean that I would be hanging over the edge of this mountain and would literally have to hold myself up. If I let go at any point, I would be over the edge and down. I would be gone. Thousands of feet drop beneath me. And I can just remember hanging in this position by the strap of the rucksack, thinking, what do I do now? Yeah, exactly. And I just didn't know what to do. And I thought, hopefully someone will come. This was before the days of mobile phones, so I couldn't call anyone. People knew that I was there on the mountain, so I knew that eventually someone would come, but it was like, how long would that be? That it could be hours and hours that I'm holding myself in this position on
there were no rangers.
There were no rangers. No, there was no one. So it was just waiting for somebody to come. And I just remember sort of being in this position for quite a while, and then I felt the experience of someone coming down the side of the mountain. And I knew that this was not a person. I knew it wasn't a physical human being coming down, because they weren't walking down the path. They were coming down the mountain, literally like they were floating down towards me. It was this real sense of a presence literally coming up and resting right beside me on the mountain, just being there with me. And it was the most amazing experience of something just being there with me in that moment. And they just were there. That I didn't hear a voice, or there was no sort of communication. It was just this overwhelming sense of benevolence and of wanting to help. And in this moment of being connected to this entity,
Mm-hmm.
the strength came to my arms and my mind just snapped into, I can do this. And I literally pulled myself up, unhooked myself, and then just lowered myself gently down back onto the path. And then I just stayed there in that moment with this being.
Yeah.
So grateful, like so immensely grateful that they had come to help. And then gradually, as I came back to my senses and found myself again and found the awareness to start down the mountain again, I just felt them go back up the mountain, just like slide away like the ocean, ebbing away. And it was just extraordinary. It was one of those very primal experiences of the natural world and the connection to it. But again, my experience of it was one of a separate being. Regardless of all my knowing of connection and oneness, it felt separate from me, which was just amazing. And I remember going down the mountain, and every time I would look back, every so often, just look back up the mountain and have this experience of them watching, just making sure I got down okay. And it was just the most amazing experience getting down to the bottom and looking up and still feeling that presence. And I have been many, many times back to this mountain since, this particular mountain. And every time when I see the mountain looming up out of the valley, immediately I get that sense of connection with that being on the mountain.
Yeah.
And the lovely little twist to the end of this is that mountaineers very often talk about when they go up mountains and climb mountains by themselves, feeling as if there is an entity with them by their side, guiding their journey. And this has been documented in journals and conversation with mountaineers. It's a very common thing when people are on mountains and by themselves and they're testing their endurance to climb. This sense of something with them, a benevolent entity that is walking with them or helping them in some way, keeping them going, getting them off the mountain safe, is a very common thing. And that to me is a very precious experience for me.
Absolutely.
And one that is so ingrained within me, sort of this idea of the entities of the mountains.
The fact that you can still go back to that place and feel that connection, it's like, oh, hello. It's like seeing an old friend, truly. When you've sensed that presence, my first reaction probably would have been, oh, hello. Hi, I'm so glad you're here.
Yes. Yeah.
And thank you. Up north in the mountains, I went off hiking up. And now that I think about it, the area that I climbed was a huge outcropping of granite boulders.
Oh.
And they were beautiful. They were rounded. They were, very difficult footing. You could easily break an ankle. But my hands just got tingly thinking about it. But I remember climbing up and around, and it was littered. Every nook and cranny was littered with pine needles. So you had to really be careful because pine needles are very slippery. And I remember going up and perching on the top. And I definitely felt the presence, but your story of that encounter in the mountain, when it was time for me to come down, I took another route, which is not advisable. When you go up a certain way, you come down the same way. And it was, the route I chose, of course, was very challenging. It was really thickly littered with pine needles. And I was literally hugging the roundness of the granite rock as I came down, and I truly felt there was somebody there. Not necessarily, I wasn't being touched, but I felt something almost like it's going to sound so weird, but like force field around me, so that I was guided down this very precariously round spot of the rock till I got to the bottom, and I remember turning around and saying thank you, whoever that was, and then kind of going on my merry little way. I was almost envious when you described your story of that entity you encountered and thinking, well, I wish I would have had that. And I think I may have.
Yeah.
I think I may have.
Yeah.
And it's not a person feeling.
No. There is a knowing, or a being known.
Yes.
By that being.
It's very sensory, I will tell you that. It's
absolutely.
very, and that's why I said like a force feeling. It was like I could really, my senses were on high alert. I could really feel, whatever it was. But yeah, that was, well, thank you for sharing that, because it sparked the old memory cells.
Very often there is this crossover between our sense of the natural world and our sense of the paranormal, and how often they sort of intertwine and intersect. I do love that experience in terms of walking through nature, walking through the wild, and having those experiences, whether it be something that is traditionally seen as supernatural or whether it just be the power of nature. I go a bit la-la when it comes to the power of nature. People are running and screaming, get away, because they know how dangerous it is, and I'm there giggling, sort of having a whale of a time as I'm dodging the lightning bolts from the sky and the falling trees.
Cut from the same bolt of fabric.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Funny story, this one. I don't know if I ever told you this one. I'd gone to Canada to do some events with a really, really lovely group of people. And I was staying with one of the people who'd organised the event, who had this beautiful log cabin in Canadian woodland. Really, really beautiful. And she drove me from the airport, and we pulled up outside the cabin, and she stopped the car, and there was a pause. And she said, before we go in, I need to tell you something. And I was like, okay, where are we going here? What's happening here? And she said, if you go for a walk in the woods, you need to make a lot of noise.
Yes.
Because there's bears.
Yes.
And if you make noise, they'll hear you coming, and they'll move away. And here I am, British person. The only bears I know are cuddly. And I'm like, bears, there's bears here. So I'm pondering this, and thinking about the bears and walking in the woodlands with the bears and doing a very British thing of, my goodness, a completely alien experience to me. Anyway, later that evening, I'm sitting with the family and we're having dinner, and the lady's husband pipes up in the conversation and says, oh, there's lots of cougars around here. So if you're walking in the woodland, and of course, being British, I don't really know what a cougar is other than the other use of the term cougar. And I'm thinking,
here?
I'm thinking, okay, do I be worried? This is what I'm thinking. This is what is going on in my head. I'm thinking of sort of going into town and sort of like there being sort of rampant cougars after.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's a very British thing. But somewhere in the conversation, it just tweaked that this was not that terminology that I was sort of connected into. It was a cougar in
A
terms
beast.
of, a mountain lion. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, I was like, oh, like the bears were not enough. Now we've got cougars. And then he said, so when you're walking out in the woodland, don't make any noise
Oh no.
because the cougars will
We'll know where
hear
you're
you.
at.
They'll know where you're at and they'll come for you. So, poor British person, the most terrifying thing we have here are goldfish in tanks. There's just like
Oh my
nothing here that's
goodness.
scary at all.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm here weighing up this thing of make noise so that the bears don't make noise so that the
So did you go out at all?
for brief periods, very wary and with the company of Canadians at all points. I think if you're out in the wilderness with bears and cougars, take a Canadian with you.
Because they know what to do.
That's a life lesson right
Yeah.
there. Always have a Canadian with you in
Yeah.
the wilderness.
I don't know why your stories do this to me, but growing up, I had an uncle that lived up north in New Hampshire on 40 acres of, I don't know what that translates to numerics that you understand, but a lot of
Well,
acres,
I do acres.
woodland. I mean, deep, deep woodland. He had his own lake. I mean, it was just amazing.
Wow.
And one summer, my aunt and uncle invited me up north. And my mother said, oh no, she can't go. She's not afraid enough. And my uncle said, I'll teach her. Don't worry. And the thing that I remember most, I didn't end up going because my mother wouldn't let me, but the thing I remember most about bears, because they too have bears and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Oh my.
No tigers. But he said, if you ever encounter a bear in the woodland, if you're climbing a hill, never run up the hill because they'll pass you. Because they have that kind of stride. They'll pass you for sure, or eat you, whichever. He said, however, if you're coming down a hill, run like hell because they can't run downhill. Their bulk actually makes them tumble down the hill. So if you ever go back to Canada, keep that in mind when you have to be silent because of the cougars.
See, now I'm wondering, what would someone like me do who is like a dog with worms going downhill? Would I have to like scrabble my legs really, really fast?
Oh.
And could a bear keep up with that? Would a bear want to keep up with that?
I
Oh, he's
don't
got
know.
worms. I'm not going near that.
Oh my goodness.
That one comes with noodles. The other thing that comes to mind is that because is the reason I have to go down like that because I'm quite bear-like and because of my bulk.
Well, I wasn't thinking bulk, but when you started saying about coming down on your butt, I was not thinking dog with worms. I was thinking bear. Because yeah, I was thinking because of my uncle. I was like, oh, okay. I understand.
Oh, you see that's it. So now in future when I come down mountains on my backside, I will be a bear, not a dog with worms.
Yeah, it sounds so much better.
Bear with worms.
Oh, no. Bear that's smart. Oh my goodness. We're out of control again.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, always. Well, it's been lovely meeting here around the fire.
Around the fire. Yes.
Fire,
I love crackling fires.
I know there's something wonderful about them, isn't there?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I'm gonna go off and explore a lonely road somewhere. Hopefully I will return and see you next time. And
I'll be here.
so and until next time that we meet again here, Or somewhere else.
or somewhere else.
Or somewhere else.
Because we tend not to stay put.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, particularly not in the month of October. Who knows where we'll be next time?
Yes, and I expect we will have to make another campfire elsewhere.
Possibly, although not if we're in a house.
Well, they better have a fireplace then.
Yes, of course. Well, until next time, Linda,
Yes,
as always. Go on, say
Yeah.
it. Say it.
Yeah. Be
Enchanted.
lovely.
Enchanted.
Don't do it. Just don't do it. It just makes me mess it up even more when you mess it up.
Be enchanted.
This podcast is freely available, and we're delighted that you find it intriguing and valuable enough to journey with us to this point. When you are ready to experience the Power of One therapy, its tools, techniques and perspectives for yourself, visit the Realm of Romanos. Go to www.one-therapy.com and start your adventure today.